The Persian Empire was 400 years old. Not a dynasty, not a kingdom. An empire that had stood for 4 centuries, that had fought Rome to a standstill, that had conquered Egypt, Syria, and Jerusalem, that had twice laid siege to Constantinople, that had rebuilt itself from every catastrophe, that had outlasted every enemy that had ever threatened its existence. Its armies wore iron armor. Its commanders were professionals who had spent lifetimes studying war. Its elephants had broken cavalry charges that nothing else on earth could stop. Its capital, Ctesiphon, was one of the most magnificent cities in the ancient world. Its treasury was the richest in the Middle East. And in November 636 CE, it faced an army of 30,000 men from the Arabian desert. The Persian general did not want to fight them. His name was Rustam Farrokhzad, the most powerful man in the Persian Empire after the emperor himself. He had watched these Arab warriors defeat Persian army after Persian army since 633 CE. He had studied what happened when they met Persian forces on the battlefield. He had seen Khalid ibn al-Walid destroy Persian armies at Walaja and at the Chains. He had seen what happened to generals who underestimated them. He had tried to make peace. He had tried to negotiate. He had tried diplomacy. He had delayed 4 months before marching from Ctesiphon. 4 months while the emperor screamed at him to advance. Local populations sent desperate letters to the emperor saying the Arabs were destroying everything up to the Euphrates, and if help did not come, they would surrender themselves to the Muslims. Rustam marched. He had no choice. He marched 30 miles from the ancient capital and set up his army along the al-Atiq Canal. He had his elephants. He had his 60,000 soldiers. By some accounts, considerably more. He had the most formidable army the Sassanid Empire could field. And across the canal, the Muslim army waited. This is the Battle of al-Qadisiyyah. And what happened over 4 days and 3 nights in November 636 CE ended something that had existed for 400 years. Not weakened it, not defeated it, ended it. The man who commanded the Muslim army should not have been able to command anything. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was the 7th person to convert to Islam. He was one of the Prophet Muhammad's closest companions. His maternal uncle, a man who had been present at Badr, at Uhud, at Khandaq. He was a man of enormous personal courage and genuine military talent. He was also, in November 636 CE, severely ill. A massive boil had erupted on his body. He had developed sciatica, so severe that he could not sit, could not stand. He could only lie on his stomach, on a cushion, looking forward. Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab had given him command of the most important battle the early Islamic world had yet faced, and Sa'd was directing it from a palace building overlooking the battlefield, lying on his chest on a raised platform, watching through a window, giving orders through his deputy Khalid ibn Urfuta, who relayed them to the battlefield below. The most important military command in early Islamic history was being exercised by a man who could not move from a building, who watched everything from a window, who had to have his instructions carried by a deputy because he could not walk to the battlefield himself. And he won. Before the battle began, Caliph Umar had attempted diplomacy. He had sent envoys to the Persian Emperor years.III, a young man who had inherited his empire as a child of 8 and who now faced its greatest crisis. The envoy An-Numan ibn Muqarrin went to Ctesiphon and presented the standard Islamic offer: accept Islam, pay jizya, or face war. Years.III decided to answer with humiliation. He ordered his servants to bring a basket. They filled it with earth. On his command, they placed the basket of earth on the head of the Muslim envoy, Asim ibn Amr al-Tamimi. The insult was clear. You are nothing. We treat you as servants. Asim looked at the earth on his head. He said, "Congratulations. The enemy has voluntarily surrendered its territory to us." He meant the earth in the basket. He meant it as prophecy. He carried the basket back to the Muslim camp as a trophy, the symbol of Persian land handed to the Muslims by the emperor's own hand. Rustam, the Persian general, reportedly heard what years.It had done and was furious. He said it meant the Persians had surrendered their land to the Muslims. He tried to get the basket back. The envoys were already at the Muslim camp. Diplomacy had failed. On both sides, the decision had been made. The Persian army crossed the al-Attic Canal on the morning of November the 16th, 636 CE. Rustam had organized his 60,000 soldiers into 4 divisions of infantry, each division supported by cavalry, and in front of each division he had placed a corps of war elephants. 8 elephants per division, in 33 elephants in total. Massive Indian-trained animals that were the tanks of the ancient world, able to smash through infantry formations, terrify horses into uselessness, and trample everything in their path. Saad watched from his window and gave the order to begin. The first day, called Yom Armath, the Day of Disorder, showed immediately why Rustam had not wanted this battle. The Muslim army was extraordinarily disciplined. Saad had organized his 30,000 men into 4 corresponding divisions, each tribe fighting with the men it knew, each unit responsible for the performance of its own fighters. The pride of tribe and clan in early Islamic Arabia was channeled into military cohesion. No unit wanted to be the one that broke. But the elephants were devastating. The Muslim horses had never faced war elephants, and they refused to charge. They turned and bolted. The elephants moved through the Muslim formations, creating chaos wherever they went, their great bulk scattering men who had stood firm against everything else. The first day ended with the Muslims badly shaken, their cavalry nearly useless, and no decisive result. That night, Saad sent his commanders a message through the darkness: target the elephant drivers, not the elephants, the riders on top, and target the eyes and the ropes that secured the saddles. On the morning of day 2, something unexpected happened. 1,000 soldiers arrived from Syria. They were reinforcements commanded by al-Qaqa ibn Amr al-Tamimi, a warrior whose reputation among the Muslims was extraordinary. He was described as a man whose first charge in a battle was worth 1,000 men, not in numbers, but in what he did to morale. When al-Qaqa arrived, the entire Muslim army saw them coming and felt what tired men feel when help arrives. Al-Qaqa did not wait. He divided his 1,000 men into groups of 100 and sent each group into the battle one after another, making the Persian army think a massive, continuous stream of reinforcements was pouring in. He personally charged the Persian center. He killed the Persian commander Birzan. He killed Bahman, the Persian general who had won the Battle of the Bridge 2 years earlier. And al-Qaqa did something remarkable with the camels. He had camels dressed and disguised to look like strange, unfamiliar beasts. He drove them at the Persian elephants. The elephants, who had been trained to fight horses but had never seen these particular animals, panicked. Some fled. The Persian cavalry, whose horses had been equally unnerved by the disguised camels, lost control. And the Muslim cavalry, following Saad's instructions from the night before, attacked the elephant riders directly, pulling them off, targeting their eyes, cutting the ropes that held the saddles in place. One by one, the elephants retreated behind the Persian line. The Muslim cavalry was suddenly effective again. Day 2 ended with heavy casualties on both sides, but with the tide beginning, very slowly, to turn. And then came the night that the ancient sources call Layla al-Harir, the night of the clatter, the night of the cat. The fighting did not stop. Through the entire night, From sunset to dawn, the two armies fought in darkness, swords against swords. Hand to hand in black air, men unable to see clearly who they were fighting, identifying friend and enemy by the battle cries they shouted. The clattering of swords and armor that gave the night its name went on, without pause. 400 years of Persian military tradition against men who had been told that dying in this cause was the highest honor available to a human being. The sources say the Muslims showed exceptional resilience through the night. They had not come to Iraq to take Persian gold. They had come because they believed completely in what they were fighting for. Dawn found both armies still in position, still fighting. Rustam looked at his men on the morning of day 4 and believed, reasonably, that after 3 days and 1 entire night of continuous fighting, there would be a pause. Both armies would rest. They would eat. They would sleep. There would be hours before the fighting resumed. Sa'd and al-Qadisiyyah thought differently. The moment the light was strong enough, they attacked. The Persians were caught completely unprepared. Units that thought they had hours to recover found Muslim soldiers in their formations before they had finished eating. The surprise attack on exhausted men who had stopped expecting a surprise created the cascade that 3 days of fighting had been building toward. The Muslim cavalry hit both Persian flanks simultaneously. The Persian center began to give ground. Unit after unit broke, not because they were cowards, but because the coherence of the army was dissolving. When the formation around you is breaking, when the men on your left are running and the men on your right are falling, holding your own position stops making sense. And then Rustam died. The exact circumstances are disputed. Some sources say a lance thrown by a Muslim soldier named Hilal ibn Ulafa struck him. Others say he was swept from his position by a sudden windstorm, one of the sandstorms that blow across the Iraqi plain without warning, and that he drowned trying to escape across the canal. Others say he fell in the general collapse and was killed by Muslim soldiers who did not even know who he was. What is not disputed is what happened the moment his death became known. On the Darafsh-Kaviani, the royal battle standard of the Sassanid Empire, one of the most sacred objects in Persian civilization, a banner covered in jewels that symbolized the divine right of Persian kings, fell into Muslim hands. When the Persian army saw their standard fall and their commander gone, they broke. The canal that had separated the armies became a death trap for the Persians, trying to retreat across it. Muslim cavalry pursued them into the water. Thousands drowned. The army that had crossed 4 days earlier in proud formation fled back across the canal in disaster. The day of disorder had become the day of collapse. Ctesiphon fell within weeks. Sa'd's army marched east toward the Persian capital and found it essentially undefended. The soldiers who survived al-Qadisiyyah had fled. years.The had abandoned the city. The magnificent white palace, the Takht Kashra, its great arch visible for miles across the Iraqi plain, was taken without a major battle. Inside, the Muslims found the largest treasury they had ever seen: gold, silver, jewels, silk, the accumulated wealth of 4 centuries of Persian imperial taxation. Sa'd wrote to Caliph Umar describing what they had found. Umar wrote back, asking if they had kept 1/5 for the treasury of the state as Islamic law required. They had. years.The fled eastward. He never recovered. He spent the remaining 15 years of his life as a refugee in his own former empire, moving from city to city, asking Persian nobles for help, finding that each city weighed the cost of sheltering him against the cost of Muslim wrath, and chose to let him move on. In 651 CE, 15 years after Qadisiyyah, he was killed by a miller in the city of Merv, not in battle, not by an army, by an ordinary man who wanted his possessions. the last emperor of the 400-year Sassanid Persian Empire, was killed by a miller in a provincial city. The significance of al-Qadisiyyah is almost impossible to overstate. Combined with the Battle of Yarmouk, which had been fought just 3 months earlier in August 636 CE, it represents the most consequential single year in the history of the ancient world. At Yarmouk, the Byzantine Empire lost everything south of Anatolia forever. At Qadisiyyah, the Sassanid Persian Empire lost everything. Two superpowers of the ancient world, the two forces that had defined the political landscape of the Middle East for 5 centuries, destroyed in 3 months by the same small caliphate from the same small city in Arabia. The transformation that followed changed human civilization permanently. Persia did not simply become a Muslim territory. Persian culture and Islamic religion merged, producing the Persian Islamic synthesis that shaped philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, poetry, and governance across a vast swath of the world for the next millennium. The Persian language survived. Persian scholars became the intellectual engine of the early Islamic world. The great Muslim scientists and philosophers and administrators of the classical period were overwhelmingly Persian in origin. The Muslims conquered Persia militarily. Persia conquered Islam culturally, and it began on 4 days in November 636 CE, when a sick man lying on his stomach in a palace window directed an impossible battle from a window, and won. Subscribe to History Rise, because history this powerful deserves to be told.